Settle in, close your eyes, and let the busy world fade away. Tonight, we journey back to the quiet, rolling hills of 17th century England, where a solitary mind first looked up at a silent, starry sky and wondered how the universe was held together. Before we begin our journey through the peaceful English countryside, take a slow, deep breath in and let it out gently. Feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, gradually replaced by a warm, comforting stillness that settles over your mind and body. There is nowhere else you need to be right now, and nothing else you need to do. Just allow the steady rhythm of your breathing to anchor you, and let the sound of my voice guide you through the softly rolling fields of history. And please remember, it is completely okay if you drift off to sleep before our story comes to its gentle end. The stars will keep watching over you, and the slow turn of the earth will carry you safely through the night, just as it always has. Far away from the noise and the bright lights of our modern world, we find ourselves in the gentle landscape of Lincolnshire, a quiet corner of England where the rhythms of life have always been measured by the slow, predictable turning of the seasons. The air here is crisp and cool, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp soil, sweet meadow grass, and ancient oak trees. Imagine standing on a slight hill, looking out over an endless patchwork of dark green fields that fade softly into the mist of the gathering evening. The only sounds are the rustle of leaves brushing against one another in the mild breeze, and the distant, rhythmic call of an owl, welcoming the arrival of the night. This is a place where time seems to slow down entirely, stretching out into long, peaceful hours of undisturbed thought. The world here feels vast and deeply comforting, wrapping you in a blanket of natural quiet that makes it easy to simply rest and be still. In this tranquil corner of the world, away from the rushing crowds and the heavy burdens of city life, a young boy would begin a slow, quiet journey of the mind. He would grow up surrounded by this deeply soothing landscape, learning to observe the world not with haste or impatience, but with the steady, calm gaze of someone who feels perfectly at home in the silence. His name was Isaac, and his entire life would gently unfold as a calm, lifelong search for the hidden harmony that gracefully holds everything in its proper place. While others moved quickly through their days, Isaac preferred to sit quietly under the vast expanse of the sky, watching the slow movement of the clouds and the gradual shifting of shadows across the tall grass. He possessed a rare and beautiful kind of patience, a mind that felt completely at rest in the quiet hours of pure observation. As we follow the unfolding chapters of his remarkable life, we will discover how this solitary observer slowly pieced together the elegant rules that govern the stars, the planets, and the gently falling leaves. It is a story completely free from the rush and pressure of our daily lives, a narrative that simply drifts along the gentle currents of calm discovery. You can relax entirely, sinking deeper into your bed, knowing that the universe he described is one of profound and comforting order, where every star has its place, and every gentle motion follows a predictable, sweeping path through the velvet dark. Let yourself be carried along on this peaceful journey as we slowly explore the quiet beauty of a mind that found perfect harmony in the deep, comforting silence of the cosmos. As the slow turn of the years carried the world forward, a gentle foundation was being laid in the heart of the English countryside, nestled within the sturdy stone walls of Woolsthorpe Manor. This modest, comforting farmhouse, built from the pale, weathered stone of the region, stood quietly among the rolling fields, a safe haven anchored deeply in the familiar rhythms of the earth. The air around the manor was always rich with the soothing scents of the land, carrying the fragrant notes of blooming lavender, damp soil from the freshly plowed fields, and the faint, sweet trace of wood smoke drifting lazily from a warm hearth. It was a place where the seasons arrived without rush or fanfare, announcing themselves softly through the changing colors of the leaves and the gradual shifting of the light across the wide, uninterrupted horizon. In this deeply peaceful setting, Young Isaac Newton spent his earliest days surrounded by an enduring stillness that would slowly shape the architecture of his remarkable mind. While other children might have filled the meadows with loud games and breathless running, Isaac found his greatest comfort in the quiet, undisturbed corners of the farm. He was a solitary child by nature, but it was a warm, welcoming kind of solitude, the sort of gentle isolation that allows a young mind to simply wander and dream without interruption. He would spend long, peaceful afternoons sitting beneath the sprawling branches of ancient trees, listening to the soft rustle of the leaves and feeling the warmth of the sun settling into the earth. There was no pressure to speak, no urgency to be anywhere else, just the endless, calming expanse of the afternoon, stretching out before him like a vast, green ocean. In these quiet hours, he began to notice the delicate details of the world, observing the slow, deliberate march of a beetle across a stone, or the way the morning dew clung to the blades of grass, gleaming quietly in the pale early light. The manor itself offered a comforting sanctuary, a house of thick walls and quiet rooms where shadows stretched softly across the floorboards as the day slowly progressed. Inside, the world felt safe and contained, smelling faintly of dried herbs, old leather, and the sweet dust of undisturbed corners. Isaac would often find a quiet spot near a sunlit window, surrounded by the comforting silence of the house, where he could sit for hours, simply watching the dust motes dance in the slanted beams of light. His young mind was gently captivated by the simple, beautiful mysteries of how things moved, how they fit together, and how the passage of time could be captured in the physical world around him. He possessed a profound patience, a natural inclination to sit completely still and let the secrets of the natural world slowly reveal themselves to him. It was in this tranquil environment that Isaac began to use his hands to explore the quiet harmony he sensed around him, finding a deep, tactile pleasure in the simple act of shaping wood and stone. He would gather small pieces of soft wood from the nearby fields and forests, carrying them back to his quiet corners to carve and shape with slow, careful movements. The air in his small room would fill with the comforting, earthy scent of fresh pine shavings and the gentle scraping sound of a small knife smoothing the edges of his creations. He was wonderfully content in these moments, completely absorbed in the peaceful rhythm of his craft, building tiny, intricate models of the windmills he had seen slowly turning in the distance. He would watch with quiet satisfaction as the tiny sails caught the breeze from an open window, spinning with a soft, steady hum that felt entirely in tune with the gentle breathing of the world outside. As his fascination with the orderly movement of the world deepened, Isaac turned his quiet attention to the most silent and steady rhythm of all, the passage of time itself. He began to trace the slow journey of the sun across the sky, watching how the light would stretch and shrink the shadows along the stone walls of the manor. With a calm, methodical patience, he started to carve intricate sundials into the very walls of his home, gently pressing small wooden pegs into the stone to mark the gradual, peaceful passing of the hours. There was something deeply soothing about the reliability of these shadows, the way they moved with absolute certainty and grace, completely untroubled by the concerns of the human world below. By anchoring the fleeting hours to the solid stone of his home, the young boy was quietly learning to measure the breadth of the universe, finding immense comfort in the predictable, repeating patterns of the light. When the sun went down and the shadows faded into the soft velvet of the night, Isaac found new ways to keep time, turning his thoughtful attention to the gentle, rhythmic properties of water. In the quiet darkness of his room, illuminated only by the warm, flickering glow of a solitary candle, he constructed delicate water clocks, designing them with a careful, almost tender precision. He would listen as the water fell, drop by slow drop, into a wooden basin below, creating a soft, rhythmic melody that echoed gently through the silent house. This steady, hypnotic dripping was like a lullaby, a deeply relaxing sound that measured the night not in rushed minutes, but in slow, peaceful droplets, each one a small, perfect sphere of water falling softly into the dark. The sound was profoundly grounding, anchoring his thoughts and providing a soothing background to the quiet workings of his imagination as the rest of the house slept peacefully around him. These early years at Woolsthorpe were a time of unhurried, gentle preparation, a long, quiet season of gathering observations without the pressure of having to explain them to anyone else. Isaac was entirely free to be just a boy, sitting quietly in the grass, his fingers tracing the grain of a carved piece of wood, his eyes watching the slow drifting of the clouds across the vast English sky. He felt the deeply comforting embrace of the natural world, understanding instinctively that he was part of a larger, harmonious system that operated with a beautiful, silent grace. The rustic, familiar surroundings of his childhood home provided the perfect, peaceful canvas for his thoughts to expand, offering a secure foundation of quiet routine and natural beauty that would sustain him throughout his life. As you rest and listen, you can almost feel the same gentle breeze that once cooled his face, bringing the quiet, rhythmic flow of time into the heart of his childhood, carrying the soft scent of apple blossoms and damp earth through the open window. In these quiet, rustic days, long before the world knew his name, Isaac was simply a boy who loved the quiet, a gentle soul finding endless comfort in the soft, predictable rhythms of the home he loved so dearly. The simple, tactile joys of his youth, the smooth feel of a polished wooden gear, the cool touch of stone beneath his fingers, and the soothing sound of water dripping slowly in the dark were the gentle anchors that kept his soaring mind safely tethered to the earth. He was learning to listen to the world, tuning his thoughts to the subtle, slow frequencies of nature that most people were simply too busy to hear. You can allow yourself to sink into that same deeply relaxed state, knowing that there is a quiet, underlying order to everything, a peaceful rhythm that continues to beat steadily beneath the surface of the world, just waiting to be softly discovered. Let the quietness of Woolsthorpe wash over you now, as the gentle ticking of the water clock slowly fades into the comfortable silence of the night. As the quiet years of his early youth gently faded into memory, the natural progression of his life carried Isaac away from the familiar meadows of Lincolnshire and into the hushed, shadowed halls of Cambridge. The university in those days was a sanctuary of pale stone and deep silence, a place where time was measured by the turning of heavy parchment pages and the slow, steady burning of wax candles late into the night. It was an environment perfectly suited to a mind that craved stillness, offering endless rows of ancient texts that smelled warmly of leather, binding glue, and the dust of forgotten centuries. In these grand, quiet libraries, Isaac found a new kind of comfort, surrounding himself with the profound thoughts of those who had looked at the world long before him. The thick walls of the university kept the noise of the bustling town safely at bay, allowing him to sink deeply into his studies without interruption. He would often sit near a tall, narrow window, letting the pale afternoon light wash over his heavy oak desk as he traced the intricate diagrams of geometry and mathematics with a slow, careful finger. The days blended together in a soothing rhythm of academic contemplation, each sunrise bringing a new opportunity to quietly unravel the complex threads of the universe. He learned to read the slow, turning shadows of the college courtyards, finding a deep, comforting rhythm in the soft chiming of the distant bells that gently marked the passing hours. In this sheltered world, he was perfectly safe to explore the ancient wisdom of philosophers and mathematicians, letting their thoughtful observations wash over him like a calm, steady stream of clear water. Yet the steady, predictable flow of university life was destined to be paused by the slow spread of the Great Plague, a historic tide that swept quietly across the country, prompting the closing of crowded spaces. But rather than a time of panic or despair, this period unfolded for Isaac as a necessary, deeply peaceful retreat from the wider world. As the university softly emptied, sending its scholars back to the safety of their distant homes, Isaac packed his few belongings and his precious books, beginning the long, slow journey back to the rolling hills of his childhood. The dirt roads winding back to Lincolnshire were quiet and dusted with the soft, golden light of the changing season. He traveled slowly, watching the landscape transition from the imposing stone spires of the university to the familiar, endlessly rolling green fields of his youth. Returning to Woolsthorpe Manor was like stepping back into a warm, familiar embrace. The sturdy stone walls, offering a profound sense of safety and isolation from the troubles of the cities. The farmhouse had not changed in his absence, remaining exactly as he had left it, steeped in the same comforting sense of dried lavender, warm earth, and old wood. The surrounding countryside was entirely untouched by the worries of the outside world, continuing its ancient, uninterrupted cycle of seasons with a reassuring predictability. Here, in the profound quiet of the rural landscape, Isaac found himself completely free from the demands of tutors and the structured schedules of university life. He was gifted with an abundance of time, a vast, open expanse of days and weeks to simply let his mind wander wherever it pleased, completely unhurried and completely at peace. This unexpected period of isolation would slowly become known as his Year of Wonders, a long, beautiful season of uninterrupted thought that would quietly change the course of human understanding, without the pressure of examinations or the expectations of others. Isaac fell into a deeply relaxing routine, allowing his natural curiosity to guide him smoothly from one gentle discovery to another. He would wake with the sun, the soft morning light filtering through the familiar wavy glass of his childhood bedroom window, and spend his days walking slowly through the fields, his mind turning over complex mathematical problems with a calm, effortless grace. The atmosphere around the manor was thick with a lazy, late summer warmth, the air heavy with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers, and the distant, rhythmic hum of bees moving lazily from blossom to blossom. It was the kind of weather that invites you to move slowly, to sit beneath the shade of a tree and simply watch the white clouds drift aimlessly across the vast, blue canvas of the sky. In the evenings, he would light a single candle and sit by the unlit hearth, the house wrapped in a profound, velvety silence that felt like a thick, protective blanket. The only sounds were the occasional settling of the old wooden floorboards and the soft, distant hooting of an owl standing watch over the sleeping fields. In this deeply meditative state, Isaac's thoughts began to expand, reaching out beyond the physical world around him to touch the invisible principles that governed the stars and the planets. The quiet isolation of Woolsthorpe provided the perfect, undisturbed soil for his ideas to take root and slowly blossom, far away from the noise and distraction of the busy world. Of all the peaceful corners of the manor grounds, Isaac found his greatest comfort in the quiet shade of the apple orchard. In the late summer, the trees were heavy with fruit, their branches bowing gently toward the earth in a silent gesture of offering. He would spend long, languid afternoons sitting with his back pressed against the rough, warm bark of an ancient apple tree, his eyes half closed as he listened to the gentle rustling of the leaves above him. The bark was reassuring and solid against his shoulders, anchoring him safely to the earth as his mind wandered through the vast, empty spaces of the sky. The leaves above acted as a natural canopy, filtering the bright afternoon sunlight into soft, dappled patterns that danced slowly across the grass with every gentle breath of wind. The orchard was a sanctuary of cool shadows and earthy scents, a place where the passage of time seemed to slow to a near standstill. It was here, in this perfect, undisturbed stillness, that he witnessed the simple, elegant event that would gently shift his understanding of the universe forever. A single apple, having reached the end of its quiet growth, released its hold on the branch and fell with a soft, muffled thud into the thick green grass below. It was an entirely ordinary moment, the kind of gentle occurrence that happens 1,000 times a day in the quiet corners of the world, entirely unnoticed. But to a mind as perfectly still and receptive as Isaac's, that soft thud resonated with a profound and beautiful meaning. As he looked from the fallen apple, resting peacefully in the grass, up toward the pale daytime moon hanging quietly in the vast sky, a marvelous realization slowly blossomed within his mind. He began to understand, with a calm and absolute certainty, that the very same invisible force that had gently pulled the apple to the earth was also reaching out across the immense, silent distances of space to hold the moon in its graceful, sweeping orbit. It was a thought of staggering beauty and simplicity, a recognition that the universe was not a chaotic collection of separate parts, but a single, harmonious system, bound together by a gentle, invisible embrace. This realization did not arrive like a sudden flash of lightning, but rather like the slow, comforting warmth of a sunrise, gently illuminating the dark corners of his understanding. The same quiet rules that governed his peaceful orchard also governed the majestic dance of the cosmos, connecting the smallest blade of grass to the most distant star in a web of perfect, elegant order. Everything was falling softly, pulling gently, and moving exactly as it was meant to move. He spent the rest of that golden afternoon simply resting beneath the tree, enveloped in the profound comfort of this new understanding. The world around him felt wonderfully unified, more intimately connected, as if the entire universe were breathing together in a single, slow, and steady rhythm. You can imagine the deep, quiet satisfaction he must have felt, sitting there in the fading light of the late summer day, the shadows of the apple trees growing long and soft across the cool grass. The air began to cool, carrying the earthy, soothing scent of the evening dew, signaling the gentle end of another peaceful day in the countryside. His mind, having traveled to the very edges of the cosmos and back, was completely at rest, deeply satisfied with the beautiful, invisible harmony it had quietly discovered. Let that same sense of perfect order and gentle connection wash over you now as you sink deeper into your own comfortable stillness. There is no need to rush, no need to figure anything out, just the comforting knowledge that everything in the universe, from the falling leaves to the circling planets, is exactly where it is meant to be, moving gracefully along its own quiet path through the dark. As the long, quiet season of his peaceful isolation in the countryside eventually drew to its natural close, Isaac made the gentle journey back to the familiar, weathered stone corridors of Cambridge. The world had slowly healed its wounds, and the university was waking once more from its long, necessary slumber, welcoming back the scholars who had sought safe refuge from the plague. Yet even as the ancient courtyards began to fill once again with the soft, distant murmur of returning students and the shuffling of heavy leather shoes on cobblestone, Isaac retreated seamlessly back into the comforting, familiar solitude of his own quiet rooms. He carried with him the profound, unhurried stillness he had absorbed while sitting beneath the branches in the apple orchards, his mind now turning slowly toward a new, delicate mystery that had long lingered in the quietest corners of his thoughts. He was no longer simply looking up at the vastness of the night sky or listening to the soft falling of an apple in the grass, but rather he began to wonder about the very nature of the light that illuminated his days. It was a gentle, unfolding curiosity, born of countless afternoons watching the sun slowly shift across the wooden floorboards of his study, observing how it warmed the settled dust and cast long, soft shadows against the plaster walls. He wanted to understand the invisible thread that connected the comforting warmth of the sun to the vibrant colors of the earth. And so, with his characteristic, methodical patience, he set about creating a perfect, quiet canvas for the light to slowly reveal its ancient secrets. To properly understand the light, he knew he first had to invite the darkness. In the deep, undisturbed quiet of his private study, far away from the prying eyes and the busy schedules of the bustling university, Isaac slowly pulled close the heavy wooden shutters over his tall windows. The bright, cheerful afternoon was gently pushed away, entirely replaced by a thick, velvety darkness that enveloped the small room in a profoundly peaceful silence. The air inside the study was beautifully cool and still, smelling faintly of old parchment, warm binding leather, melted wax, and the sweet, dry scent of undisturbed dust. With careful, deliberate movements, he pierced a single tiny hole in one of the thick wooden boards covering the glass. As he did, a perfect, brilliant beam of pure golden sunlight pierced the gloom, stretching across the dark room like a delicate, glowing thread. In the profound darkness of the study, this single solitary beam became a mesmerizing focal point, illuminating thousands of tiny dust motes that drifted lazily through the air, catching the light like microscopic stars. They turned endlessly in a slow, hypnotic dance, riding the invisible currents of the still air in a beautifully chaotic yet perfectly silent rhythm. He would sit for long, quiet hours, simply watching this beam of light, marveling at its straight, unwavering path through the darkness, feeling a deep, enduring sense of calm wash over him in the presence of such simple, geometric perfection. It was into this quiet, darkened sanctuary that he introduced a simple piece of glass, a heavy, triangular prism that he had acquired during his travels. When he held the prism in his hands, it felt wonderfully smooth and delightfully cool to the touch, its precisely cut edges offering a pleasing, solid weight against his palms. There was a quiet, pristine elegance to the object, a flawless clarity that seemed entirely separate from the messy, complicated world outside his shuttered window. With the slow, steady movements of a man completely absorbed in a moving meditation, he lifted the cool glass and placed it gently directly into the path of the solitary sunbeam. He did not rush, taking his time to adjust the angle with infinite care, letting his sensitive fingers guide the heavy glass until it rested perfectly within the golden light. As the light entered the clear, cold glass, something truly marvelous and entirely silent began to unfold in the dimness of the room. The straight golden thread of the sunbeam was gently bent, slowing down as it moved through the dense, clear medium of the glass, entirely transforming its nature as it emerged slowly from the other side. The result was a soft, breathtaking revelation that painted itself gracefully across the shadowed wall of his study. The single beam of white light blossomed outward, unfurling into a magnificent, glowing spectrum of colors that washed over the dark wood like a slow, hypnotic painting coming to vibrant life. There was the deep, warm red of a dying hearth ember, fading gently into a soft, hazy orange, and then melting seamlessly into the bright, cheerful yellow of a spring meadow. Beside it lay the tranquil, soothing green of the rolling Lincolnshire hills he loved so much, giving way to the cool, deep blue of an evening sky just before dusk, and finally deepening into a rich, quiet violet that seemed to fade effortlessly back into the comforting shadows of the room. The colors glowed with a soft, ethereal light, entirely silent and deeply mesmerizing, holding the ancient secrets of the sun upon the rough wall of a modest scholar's room. Isaac sat back in his wooden chair in the quiet darkness, letting the beautiful, multicolored glow wash softly over his face and hands, his mind perfectly still as he absorbed the profound, peaceful meaning of what he had just gently coaxed into view. He realized, with the calm, quiet certainty of a man who has just uncovered a profound universal truth, that the pure white light of the sun was not simple or empty at all. Instead, it was a beautiful, invisible embrace that held all the magnificent colors of the world within it, traveling millions of miles through the empty, silent void of space, only to quietly reveal its hidden beauty when it passed through his humble piece of glass. It was a thought of immense, comforting harmony, suggesting that even the most ordinary, everyday things in the universe were woven from a fabric of complex, hidden wonders. The world was not being painted with colors from the outside, but rather, everything around him, the green leaves of the trees, the red petals of a rose, the blue expanse of the gentle ocean, was simply reflecting back the colors that were already quietly sleeping within the light itself. Simple realization settled into his mind with the extreme softness of falling snow, bringing with it a deep, enduring sense of peace and rightness. He had taken the intangible, fleeting essence of light and found a gentle way to read it, to understand its silent language, without ever breaking the profound, protective silence of his darkened room. For many quiet days and weeks, this deeply peaceful ritual became the comforting rhythm of his life. He would wake, close the heavy shutters against the noise of the waking world, and wait patiently for the sun to slowly rise high enough to cast its golden thread through the tiny hole in the wood. He experimented with endless, unhurried patience, eventually introducing a second prism into the beam to gather the beautiful spectrum of colors and gently weave them back together. He watched with quiet, deep satisfaction as the wide band of colors smoothly reformed into a single pure beam of white light. It was a delicate, beautiful dance of division and reunification, an entirely private, silent symphony of light played out day after day in the comforting shadows of his study. he would sit at his heavy oak desk in the dim, colorful light, carefully dipping his quill into the dark inkwell. The only sound in the entire room being the soft, rhythmic scratching of the feather against the thick parchment as he slowly recorded his discoveries. The room remained a sanctuary of focused, peaceful thought, insulated completely from the rushing pace of human concerns, wrapped entirely instead in the timeless, gentle laws of the natural world. As the long hours would pass and the afternoon would begin its slow, inevitable transition into evening, the angle of the sun would eventually dip too low in the sky, and the brilliant spectrum on the wall would gradually soften and fade. The glowing colors would grow dim, melting gently back into the comforting, familiar shadows of the room, signaling the natural, peaceful end of his daily observations. There was no disappointment in this slow fading, no urgent desire to hold on to the light, only a deep, quiet gratitude for the hours of peaceful discovery that the day had provided. Isaac would slowly gather his scattered notes, setting the cool glass prisms carefully back into their velvet-lined wooden box, and open the shutters just enough to let the twilight breeze drift softly into the room. The cool evening air would carry the distant, soothing sounds of the university slowly settling down for the night, the soft chiming of the distant bells gently marking the peaceful closing of the day. As you listen, you can imagine the deep, restful satisfaction of a mind that has spent the entire day quietly unwrapping the beautiful mysteries of the light. Let that same peaceful satisfaction settle over you now as the bright colors of the day slowly fade away, leaving you wrapped securely in the calm, protective embrace of the gathering night. As the quiet years continued their slow, unbroken turning, Isaac's mind gently expanded outward, moving beyond the colorful, painted light of his shuttered room to embrace the vast, silent expanse of the night sky. The peaceful sanctuary of his Cambridge study remained his anchor, a familiar haven of worn leather and polished oak, but his thoughts were beginning to travel much further, drifting gracefully through the immense, empty spaces between the stars. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the college courtyard settled into the comfortable stillness of sleep, he would slowly open his tall windows to the cool night air. The darkness outside was soft and welcoming, a boundless velvet canvas dotted with the faint, steady glow of distant worlds. He would stand there for long, quiet hours, resting his hands against the cool stone of the windowsill, simply watching the slow, majestic wheeling of the heavens above. There was a profound, enduring peace in the way the stars moved together in perfect, silent harmony, a gentle reassurance that no matter what happened in the busy, waking world below, the universe would always continue its calm, predictable dance through the dark. He felt a deep, abiding connection to this celestial rhythm, a quiet certainty that the same elegant rules that governed the familiar fields of his childhood were also at play in the furthest unseen reaches of the cosmos. With a mind completely at rest and a heart full of patient wonder, Isaac slowly sat down at his heavy wooden desk to begin the monumental task of translating the silent language of the stars onto the thick, creamy pages of parchment before him. The only light in the room came from a single solitary candle, its warm, amber flame flickering softly, casting long, friendly shadows that danced slowly across the plaster walls. The air was wonderfully still, carrying only the familiar, comforting scents of melted beeswax, dark iron gall ink, and the dry, sweet dust of old books. He worked without any sense of urgency, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who knows he has all the time in the world. He would dip his quill into the dark pool of ink, listening to the soft, rhythmic scratching of the feather against the rough texture of the paper, a soothing, repetitive sound that became a kind of quiet lullaby in the lonely hours of the night. Each carefully formed letter, each sweeping line of geometry, was a gentle step closer to understanding the grand, clockwork design of creation. He was not rushing to meet a deadline or seeking the loud applause of his peers, but was simply quietly recording the beautiful truths that the universe was slowly whispering to him in the dark. As the pages slowly filled with his elegant handwriting, he began to trace the vast, sweeping orbits of the planets, mapping their silent, graceful journeys around the warm central glow of the sun. He imagined the moon, that pale, comforting guardian of the night, not as a wandering stranger, but as a faithful companion, forever bound to the earth in a slow, eternal embrace. In his mind, he could see the elegant curves of these celestial paths, perfect arcs, drawn across the emptiness of space by an invisible guiding hand. There was no chaos in this vision, no random frightening movements, only a deep, abiding order that felt incredibly safe and reassuring. The planets did not wander aimlessly, but rather followed their appointed rounds with a calm, unwavering devotion, returning again and again to the same places in the sky, exactly as they were meant to do. This predictability was deeply soothing to his soul, offering a profound sense of stability in a world that so often felt uncertain and fleeting. He found immense comfort in the knowledge that the universe was a place of rules and reason, a beautifully balanced system where everything had its proper place and its proper time. It was during these long, peaceful nights of writing that the simple, quiet memory of the apple falling in the Woolsthorpe orchard returned to him, blending seamlessly with his visions of the circling planets. He realized with a sense of calm, absolute clarity that the same gentle, invisible force that had pulled the fruit softly to the grass was the very same force that reached out across millions of miles to hold the moon in its steady orbit. It was a beautiful, unifying thought, a gentle thread that tied the smallest, most ordinary moments of earthly life to the grandest, most majestic movements of the heavens. Gravity, he called it, a word that spoke of weight and significance, but also of a profound, holding embrace. It was an invisible tether that connected all things, ensuring that nothing was ever truly lost or adrift in the vastness of space. The Earth was holding onto the moon, the sun was holding onto the Earth, and the entire universe was wrapped in this quiet, unending embrace of mutual attraction. As you lie resting in the quiet of your own room, you can feel this same gentle pull, the comforting weight of the Earth, safely holding you, keeping you securely anchored as you drift slowly towards sleep. The work that slowly grew from these quiet nights of contemplation would eventually become known as the Principia, a grand, sweeping tapestry of mathematics and natural philosophy that would gently change the way humanity understood its place in the cosmos. But in the quiet sanctuary of his study, it was simply a stack of handwritten pages, growing thicker with each passing season. He worked through the crisp, silent nights of winter, when the frost formed delicate, fern-like patterns on the glass of his windows, and the fire in the hearth burned down to soft, glowing embers. He continued through the mild, fragrant evenings of spring, when the gentle scent of damp earth and blooming flowers drifted in from the college gardens below. And he wrote through the warm, heavy nights of summer, when the air was thick and still, and the only sound was the distant, rhythmic chirping of crickets hiding in the long grass. Through it all, his dedication never wavered, his focus remaining as steady and reliable as the ticking of the water clock in the corner of his room. He was building a magnificent, invisible architecture, laying down the quiet rules that kept the universe humming along in perfect, beautiful harmony. To describe this magnificent, interconnected system, Isaac relied not on the imprecise words of ordinary language, but on the pure, flawless beauty of geometry and mathematics. In the quiet isolation of his room, numbers and curves became his closest companions, their absolute certainty offering a deeply soothing refuge from the unpredictable nature of human life. He would draw perfect circles and sweeping ellipses on the thick paper, tracing the paths of comets that wandered from the deepest, darkest edges of the solar system, only to return softly to the warmth of the sun. There was a gentle, almost hypnotic rhythm to his calculations, a slow, methodical unfolding of logic that was as calming as watching the steady, unbroken flow of a deep river. Every equation was perfectly balanced, every side equal to the other, creating a sense of profound harmony that echoed the balance of the universe itself. He found immense joy in this silent, ordered world, a place where everything made sense, where every question had a patient, waiting answer, if only one took the time to look closely enough. As his grand vision slowly took shape on the parchment, Isaac began to see the entire cosmos as a beautifully crafted machine, a vast, intricate clockwork of unimaginable scale and flawless precision. In this deeply comforting view of the world, every star, every planet, and every falling leaf was like a perfectly polished gear, turning smoothly and silently in time with all the others. There was no friction, no jarring stops or starts, only the continuous, graceful flow of motion that had been set into place at the very beginning of time. This clockwork universe did not require constant tinkering or anxious oversight, but simply ran exactly as it was designed to run, ticking away the centuries with a calm, unshakable reliability. It was a deeply peaceful realization, one that lifted the burden of worry from the shoulders of humanity. You did not have to fear the unknown, for the unknown was governed by the same gentle, predictable laws as the familiar. You could simply rest, secure in the knowledge that the grand machinery of existence was operating flawlessly, humming a quiet, eternal tune that held everything together in a state of perfect, enduring balance. There is a profound healing comfort in predictability, in knowing that the sun will always rise, the tides will always turn, and the stars will always wheel faithfully across the night sky. Isaac spent his days and nights steeped in this comforting certainty, surrounded by the elegant equations that proved the universe was a place of ultimate safety and order. When his eyes grew tired from reading in the dim light, he would lean back in his heavy chair, close his eyes, and simply feel the slow, steady turning of the world beneath him. He could almost hear the quiet, rhythmic ticking of the cosmic clock, a low, soothing vibration that resonated deep within his bones. It was a sound that told him all was well, that everything was proceeding exactly as it should, without rush or panic. He was completely at peace in his quiet study, a solitary man who had found the ultimate companionship in the harmonious workings of the natural world. He did not need the noisy distractions of society, for he was already a part of the grandest, most beautiful dance ever conceived, entirely content to watch from the quiet shadows of his room. Outside his window, the ancient university slept on, completely unaware of the profound discoveries taking shape in the small candlelit room above. The narrow cobblestone streets were empty and silent, bathed in the soft, milky light of the moon, while the heavy stone walls of the colleges stood like silent guardians over the sleeping scholars. The only occasional sound was the distant, muffled chime of a clock tower, gently marking the passage of the hours, its low, resonant tones drifting slowly through the cool night air. Isaac would listen to these bells, feeling a deep kinship with their steady, reliable measure of time. They were the earthly echo of the celestial clockwork he was describing, a comforting reminder that the slow, measured pace of time was a universal constant. He felt a quiet, protective tenderness toward the sleeping world around him, knowing that the laws he was writing down were the very things keeping them safe, holding their beds to the floor and the roof over their heads as they dreamed peacefully in the dark. And so, page by page, night after quiet night, the great work was finally brought to its gentle conclusion. There was no grand celebration, no loud applause breaking the silence of his study, only a deep, profound sigh of satisfaction as he set his quill down for the last time. He carefully gathered the thick stack of parchment, aligning the edges with slow, deliberate movements, feeling the satisfying weight of the completed manuscript in his hands. He had captured the quiet music of the spheres, writing down the laws that kept the stars from falling and the oceans in their beds. He blew softly on the warm, amber flame of the candle, watching as the glowing wick faded gently into a thin wisp of sweet-smelling smoke, returning the room to the comforting embrace of the dark. As he moved slowly toward his bed, the heavy silence of the night felt different, no longer empty but filled with a rich, unseen order. The universe was awake, turning slowly and perfectly in the dark, watching over him with a calm, unwavering gaze. You too can surrender to this beautiful clockwork rhythm, letting go of all your waking concerns, knowing that you are safely held in the gentle, invisible embrace of a world that always knows exactly what it is doing. As the long, quiet years of his academic life slowly gathered like fallen leaves in a tranquil courtyard. A gentle, natural shift began to softly unfold in Isaac's world. He had spent decades wrapped securely in the comforting solitary silence of his Cambridge study, his mind drifting peacefully through the immense void of space as he traced the invisible paths of the stars and wrote the enduring laws of the universe. Yet, even the most dedicated and brilliant minds eventually seek a new rhythm, a different kind of quiet order to anchor the passing of their days. With the slow, unhurried grace of a man smoothly transitioning into the autumn of his life, he carefully packed his worn leather books and his precious stacks of handwritten notes, preparing to leave the familiar, pale stone walls of the university behind. It was not a sudden departure, but a slow, deliberate closing of one beautiful chapter to gently open another. His destination was the sprawling, historic expanse of London, a city that pulsed with a different kind of life, yet offered its own unique, deeply comforting rhythms. The journey away from the wide, open skies of the rural countryside was a peaceful transition, a slow, rocking carriage ride that carried him smoothly along dirt roads and over stone bridges toward his new home. As he gradually approached the city, the crisp, clear air of the open landscape softly gave way to the muffled gray of London, welcoming him into a new, sheltered phase of life. This atmospheric change from the sharp clarity of rural starlight to the cozy, heavy mist of the historic city brought a profound, new kind of tranquility to his daily existence. London in those days was often gently veiled in a soft, dense fog that drifted slowly off the cool waters of the River Thames, dampening the harsh noises of the cobblestone streets and turning the bustling crowds into quiet, shadowy figures moving gracefully through the mist. The air carried the faint, nostalgic scent of wood smoke and damp stone, creating an environment that felt insulated and profoundly safe. As the late afternoons would slowly fade into evening, the warm amber glow of street lanterns would begin to bloom softly through the grayness, casting long, friendly shadows and creating a deeply cozy, intimate atmosphere that seemed to wrap the city in a protective embrace. Isaac settled comfortably into a grand but remarkably quiet home, a private sanctuary adorned with dark, polished wood paneling, heavy velvet curtains that blocked out the chill, and the ever-present soothing warmth of a crackling hearth fire. He found immense comfort in the hushed silence of his new London study, a space where he could sit deep within the cushions of a leather chair, listening to the soft cop and hiss of the burning logs. Chilly world of the city remained safely outside his thick glass windows, leaving him in a perfectly contained world that encouraged slow, reflective thought and a deep, enduring sense of peace. In the mornings, the transition from the deep slumber of the night into the waking world was always slow and gentle. He would rise with the late, pale sun that struggled softly to pierce the thick London fog, taking his time to enjoy a quiet, warm drink by the window. The city outside was waking up, but the thick glass of his study window muted the sounds of passing carts and distant voices into a soothing, low hum. There was no rush to his mornings, no urgent schedule demanding his immediate attention, only the slow, comforting preparation for a day of meticulous, satisfying work. In this new, fog-wrapped city, Isaac gracefully took on the dignified role of overseeing the Royal Mint. Located safely within the ancient, reassuringly sturdy stone walls of the Tower of London. To many outside observers, the Mint might have seemed a place of loud, heavy industry, but to his meticulously ordered mind, it transformed into a beautiful, large-scale laboratory of ultimate precision and care. He approached his new duties not as a stressful administrative burden, but as a deeply satisfying, practical continuation of his lifelong search for harmony, applying his vast intellect to the quiet, careful craft of creating perfect, uniform objects. He would walk slowly through the warm, dimly lit rooms of the Mint, watching the gentle, rhythmic movements of the craftsmen as they carefully melted the dull ore, poured the liquid metal, and stamped the bright, heavy silver. The air inside the ancient walls was thick with the earthy, metallic scent of heated coins and the steady, repeating thud of the heavy presses coming down in perfect time. To him, these sounds were not chaotic noise, but a comforting industrial heartbeat, a steady, predictable rhythm that beautifully echoed the reliable turning of the Clockwork Universe he had spent his earlier years describing. He found a new grounding solace in this regular, highly structured routine, happily leaving behind the immense, floating concepts of endless space and invisible gravity to focus entirely on the reassuring weight of things he could hold securely in his own hands. There was a profound, tactile pleasure in the daily work of the mint, a quiet, almost meditative satisfaction in bringing flawless mathematical order to the physical world of commerce. He would spend long, patient hours simply examining the newly pressed silver coins, letting his sensitive fingers trace the crisp, raised edges and the smooth, perfectly polished surfaces of the metal. The fresh silver felt wonderfully cool and solid against his skin, each coin a tiny, perfect disk of absolute certainty in a world that was otherwise constantly shifting and changing. He insisted on the utmost precision in every step of the process, using delicate, carefully balanced scales and highly calibrated weights to ensure that every single coin was exactly as it should be, an identical, flawless twin to the thousands of others pouring softly from the heavy presses. When he gathered a handful of these pristine coins and let them slide slowly from one palm to another, they made a gentle, musical clinking sound, a high, clear note that rang out softly and pleasantly in the quiet of his office. It was the beautiful sound of perfect order, a soothing metallic melody that pleased his mathematical mind immensely and brought a soft smile to his face. He was no longer trying to solve the grand, distant mysteries of the heavens, but instead, he was entirely content ensuring that a small, beautiful part of the earthly world operated with the same flawless, predictable grace as the circling planets. This later period of his life was a gentle, deeply comforting descent from the lofty, demanding heights of pure theory into the warm, tangible reality of a predictable daily routine. The intense, burning curiosity of his solitary youth had gradually softened into a calm, steady oversight, a peaceful elder statesmanship that perfectly suited his aging frame and his desire for tranquility. When his unhurried, careful work at the mint was finally done for the day, he would return slowly through the foggy, dimly lit streets of London, the carriage wheels rolling smoothly over the damp stones, carrying him back to the quiet warmth of his home. He would sit close to the glowing hearth, watching the gentle firelight dance softly across the polished wooden surfaces of his study, feeling the deep, restful satisfaction of a day spent bringing a touch of perfect order to the world. Sometimes, as the house grew completely silent, he would reach into his pocket and retrieve a single, newly minted silver coin, turning it slowly over and over in his fingers, feeling its smooth, comforting perfection as the evening slowly deepened into night. You can imagine him there, resting comfortably in his heavy chair, completely at peace with the small, quiet rhythms of his life, his breathing slowing down in time with the soft ticking of the clock. Let that same sense of grounded, tangible comfort wash over you now, feeling the reassuring weight of your blankets settling softly around you, safe and secure in the quiet, predictable order of the resting world as you drift closer and closer to sleep. While the daylight hours were filled with the crisp metallic exactness of the mint, the deep velvet hours of the night belonged to a much older, quieter kind of magic. Long after the bustling streets of London had settled into their heavy, fog-blanketed sleep, and the distant sounds of horse-drawn carriages had entirely faded away, Isaac would retreat to the most private, secluded corners of his home. Here, behind thick oak doors that kept the busy world safely at bay, he maintained a secret sanctuary, a small, warmly lit laboratory dedicated to the ancient, deeply contemplative art of alchemy. This was not the loud, public science of his university days, nor was it the practical administration of his later career, but a highly personal, deeply spiritual search for the hidden connections that lay sleeping within the very heart of matter. In the dim, comforting glow of this private room, he traded the cold, predictable certainties of mathematics for the warm, shifting mysteries of nature. The atmosphere was incredibly intimate, wrapped in a profound silence that was broken only by the soft, rhythmic breathing of a small, carefully tended furnace glowing steadily in the corner. He found immense solace in this quiet space, a sanctuary where he could explore the invisible architecture of the universe without the pressure of having to publish his findings or explain his profound thoughts to anyone else. It was his own private refuge, a place of warmth and shadow where the passage of time seemed to stand completely still. The air in the laboratory was always thick and comforting, carrying a deeply nostalgic, earthy fragrance of wood ash, melting resin, and the faint, sweet scent of burning charcoal. He would spend countless unhurried hours standing before the small brick furnace, his face bathed in the gentle, amber light of the fire, simply watching the slow, mesmerizing dance of the flames. There was a profoundly meditative quality to this work, a slow, patient rhythm that required him to simply sit and observe the gradual transformation of the elements. He would gently add a handful of coal to the fire, listening to the soft, satisfying crackle as the embers flared briefly before settling back into a deep, glowing red. Above the fire, glass vessels of various elegant shapes and sizes sat quietly in beds of warm sand, their contents bubbling with a low, soothing murmur that sounded remarkably like a distant, gently flowing stream. He would watch the slow rise and fall of vapors within the clear glass, captivated by the delicate colors that would softly bloom and fade as the temperature gently shifted. The room was a beautiful tapestry of dancing shadows and soft reflections, the firelight catching the smooth curves of the glass and the polished brass of his measuring scales. Nightly ritual was never about the pursuit of ordinary wealth or the simple desire to turn common metals into gold, but rather a beautiful, profound attempt to understand the soul of the earth itself. He believed, as many ancient philosophers did, that the natural world was entirely alive, that metals grew slowly and silently in the dark womb of the mountains, evolving over thousands of peaceful years. By gently applying heat and careful attention in his laboratory, he felt he was simply encouraging nature along its natural, beautiful path of growth and refinement. He viewed the entire universe as a single, beautifully interconnected web, where the majestic shining of a distant star, the soft falling of an apple in a quiet orchard, and the slow crystallization of salt in a glass flask were all guided by the exact same divine, invisible hand. As he watched, the materials slowly break down and recombine in the gentle heat of the furnace, he felt a deep, abiding connection to the ancient, slow-moving rhythms of the earth. He was completely losing himself in the peaceful, repeating cycles of dissolution and creation, feeling the same gentle harmony in his small crucible that he had once observed in the sweeping orbits of the planets. When he was not tending to the gentle warmth of the furnace, he could be found sitting at a heavy wooden table nearby, surrounded by towering stacks of old, fragile books and crumbling manuscripts. These were texts written by wise, solitary men who had lived centuries before him, scholars who had also spent their lives quietly searching for the hidden truths of the world. In the soft, flickering light of a single candle, he would slowly trace the faded, elegant script with his finger, completely absorbed in the ancient wisdom they contained. The only sound in the room was the incredibly soft, dry rustle of parchment pages being turned with the utmost care, a comforting, familiar sound that anchored him safely in the silent hours of the night. He read these texts not with the critical eye of a modern scientist, but with the open, receptive heart of a seeker, looking for the gentle metaphors and beautiful allegories that described the spiritual purification of the human soul. The language of alchemy was wonderfully rich and poetic, filled with images of soaring birds, blooming flowers, and sleeping kings, providing a deeply comforting contrast to the strict, uncompromising logic of his mathematical work. The old books smelled wonderfully of dry dust, aged leather, and time itself, wrapping him in a comforting embrace of history. This private spiritual exploration extended gracefully into his deep, quiet study of theology as he sought to understand the grand, overarching design of the Creator. He viewed the ancient scriptures not merely as historical records, but as an intricate, beautiful puzzle, a coded message left behind by a benevolent intelligence, waiting patiently to be understood. With the same methodical, unhurried patience he had once applied to the complex movements of the moon, he would pore over ancient languages, tracing the lineage of words and ideas through the long, quiet corridors of time. He spent years slowly working out the dimensions of ancient temples, finding profound comfort in the sacred geometry and the perfect divine proportions described in the texts. He believed that if he looked closely enough, and with enough quiet reverence, he could glimpse the elegant, harmonious blueprint of creation itself. This deeply personal work was his ultimate retreat, a purely intellectual meditation that required nothing from the outside world, offering him a vast, tranquil ocean of thought where his mind could float freely, completely unburdened by the earthly concerns of the day or the opinions of his peers. There is a wonderful, profound comfort in realizing that you do not need to know the answers to everything, that some beautiful mysteries are simply meant to be gently experienced rather than forcefully solved. As Isaac sat in the warm, enclosed darkness of his laboratory, surrounded by his ancient books and his gently glowing furnace, he was entirely at peace with the unknown. The Principia had brilliantly explained the physical laws of motion, but in this quiet room, he was allowing himself to gently touch the edges of the invisible, the spiritual, and the deeply mysterious. He found immense joy in the slow, ongoing process of seeking, rather than the finality of arriving at a definitive conclusion. The hours would slip by softly, marked only by the gentle burning down of the candle and the gradual shifting of the warm shadows across the stone floor. He was a man completely at home in his own company, entirely satisfied by the rich, complex world that existed purely within his own mind, insulated from the loud and rushing pace of the world outside. You can let yourself sink into that same deep, comforting sense of acceptance, knowing that the world is full of beautiful mysteries that do not require your immediate attention, leaving you entirely free to simply rest in the quiet of the present moment. As the deep night slowly began its gentle transition into the earliest, pale hours of the morning, the fire in the small furnace would gradually begin to die down. The bright, energetic orange flames would softly give way to a deep, resonant red, before finally settling into a blanket of soft gray ash that held the remaining comforting warmth of the night. Isaac would not rush to revive the fire, but would instead sit quietly in his leather chair, watching the embers slowly fade, feeling a deep, restful satisfaction in the natural, peaceful conclusion of the night's work. The laboratory would begin to cool, the glass vessels growing silent as their shifting contents slowly settled back into perfect, undisturbed stillness. With slow, deliberate movements, he would carefully close his heavy books, sliding them safely back onto their wooden shelves, and gently extinguish his solitary reading candle. The room would plunge back into a comforting, peaceful darkness, smelling faintly of old paper, warm sand, and sweet wood smoke. As he stepped out of the laboratory and quietly locked the heavy oak door behind him, he left the profound mysteries of the universe safely contained within, his mind perfectly calm, beautifully quiet, and entirely ready to surrender to the soft, welcoming embrace of a long and restful sleep. As the long, beautiful arc of his life gently began its final sweeping descent, the busy, colorful world of the city and the heavy metallic responsibilities of the mint slowly faded into the quiet, comfortable background. Isaac was now an older man, highly respected and honored by the society around him, yet completely unchanged in the deep, silent core of his being. He remained in his quiet heart, the exact same thoughtful boy who had once sat completely still in the green, rolling fields of Woolsthorpe, watching the shadows lengthen and listening to the soft rustle of the wind through the apple trees. His days were now measured not by the rigorous, demanding calculations of new discoveries or the pressing amber heat of the alchemical furnace, but by a slow, profound serenity that settled over him like a thick, warm blanket. He spent his time resting comfortably in the familiar sanctuary of his study, sitting in his favorite heavy chair, entirely surrounded by the comforting, familiar sense of his long life, the smell of old, cracking leather, the dry, sweet scent of faded parchment, and the lingering, nostalgic trace of wood smoke from the quiet hearth. His movements had grown slow and deliberate, matching the unhurried, peaceful rhythm of his thoughts. It was a beautiful time of gentle reflection, a quiet inward gathering of memories as he looked back across the vast, remarkable landscape of his long dedicated life. Despite the towering, magnificent monuments of thought he had patiently built over the decades, the elegant laws of motion he had written, and the majestic clockwork universe he had so beautifully described, he did not look upon his life's work with a sense of pride or arrogant finality. Instead, he possessed a beautiful, deeply comforting humility, a profound recognition that the universe was endlessly vast and wonderfully mysterious. In the quiet twilight of his final years, he offered a gentle, poetic reflection on his long journey, a simple, beautiful thought that perfectly captured the peaceful nature of his soaring mind. He described himself not as a great master of universal knowledge, but simply as a small boy playing alone on the quiet shores of the world. He felt he had merely been diverting himself by occasionally finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary. He would hold these small, beautiful earthly treasures in his hands, quietly admiring their smooth, water-worn shapes and the delicate, curving ridges of their colorful surfaces, feeling a deep sense of wonder and their simple perfection. And yet, while he held these few small stones, the great, endless ocean of truth lay entirely undiscovered before him, a vast, mysterious expanse of deep water stretching out into the unknowable, silent horizon. Imagine standing on that quiet, endless shoreline right now, bathed in the soft, pale silver light of the evening moon. You can almost hear the slow, rhythmic breathing sound of the dark water gently meeting the sand, the heavy waves rolling softly forward and then pulling slowly, deliberately back, over and over again, in a deeply soothing, eternal rhythm. The air is wonderfully cool and fresh, carrying the clean, comforting scent of salt and the vast, empty spaces of the open sea. There is absolutely no need to build a ship and sail out onto that dark ocean, no need to chart its unfathomable depths or map its distant, unseen shores. It is more than enough to simply stand on the quiet beach, to feel the soft, damp sand giving way beneath your feet, and to hold a single, smooth, cool pebble securely in your hand. The vastness of the ocean before you is not frightening or overwhelming, but profoundly comforting, reminding us that there are ancient, beautiful mysteries in the world that we do not ever have to solve. We can simply let them be exactly as they are, resting peacefully on the shore, lulled entirely to sleep by the gentle, eternal breathing of the dark water. As you lie there, listening to the soft, steady, unbroken rhythm of your own breathing, you can allow yourself to slowly put down your own pebbles and shells, to finally let go of all the small, daily concerns and thoughts you have been carrying with you throughout the day. The work is completely done, the long day is over, and there is absolutely nothing left for you to figure out or understand. You can simply rest, feeling yourself safely anchored to the earth by the very same invisible, holding embrace that Isaac had so beautifully described in his quiet room. The universe will continue its quiet, majestic turning through the deep dark. The planets will trace their sweeping, perfect orbits, and the bright, distant stars will keep their patient, unblinking watch over the sleeping world, all operating with a flawless, silent clockwork precision that requires no effort, no guidance, and no worry from you at all. Everything is exactly in its proper place, moving exactly as it should. In the final fading hours of his extraordinary life, wrapped securely in the deep, quiet comfort of his home, Isaac felt this same profound resting peace. The room grew completely still around him. The warm fire in the hearth burned down to a bed of soft, glowing red embers, and the familiar shadows stretched long and comforting across the wooden floorboards. He had spent his entire life quietly listening to the soft, ancient rhythms of the world, finding the hidden, beautiful harmony that bound the smallest blade of grass to the most distant glowing star. He understood with absolute clarity that he was simply a small, beautiful part of a grand, sweeping design, a design that was completely safe, deeply ordered, and entirely at rest. There was no fear in this gentle, slow fading, only a quiet, beautiful acceptance, a slow, natural letting go of the physical world as his mind drifted closer and closer to the ultimate, silent harmony he had always sought. He had found the perfect order he was looking for, and now it was simply time to rest eternally within it. Let that same sense of quiet, final acceptance wash completely over you, feeling the comfortable, heavy weight of your blankets and the soft, deep support of your bed. The world is quiet, the night is long, and you are entirely safe in the dark. And so, leaving the great ocean of truth to the stars, he simply closed his eyes and drifted away into the quiet, eternal order he had always known.